I am from Toyo University in Japan as well as the Ateneo de Manila University. And I will be your moderator for session 6, where we have 2 presentations on migration, and the third one is on Filipina K-pop concert goals. So for the first presentation, we have Neville J. Manawis of the Ateneo de Manila University, and the title of his presentation is Korean Migration to the Philippines, the 1.5 Generation. So each presenter has 20 minutes. Mr. Manawis.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having me. To begin with, some disclaimers. I am presenting something that is very new to me. Okay? To begin with, my academic background is rooted in history. I graduated from the University of the Philippines and focused my master's in the University of the Philippines as well. And my area of expertise is the Philippines and the Korean War. Okay? Everything about the Korean War I'm familiar with. With a focus on Korean history and Philippine-South Korean relations. I've spent years teaching, researching in the field. However, this is the first time I'm presenting at a Korean conference on a sociological topic. A shift that began just 4 or 5 years ago, part of a broader ongoing research project. It's no exaggeration to say that this turn towards sociological research has been a transformative experience for me. Everything about it feels new and truthfully quite exhilarating and nakakakaba. Okay? This excitement has also deepened my curiosity about migration as a lived experience, especially how it unfolds over time and across generations. Okay? So, Korean migration to the Philippines has historical roots, okay? Which early arrivals for various reasons. However, more distinct patterns emerged after the Korean War in the 1950s, initially driven by business, government projects, education. It wasn't until the late 1990s that the Philippines became a popular destination for South Koreans due to its low cost of living, relaxed lifestyle, English language education system, and proximity to South Korea. Key factors like the globalization or the Sikyewa policy and the 1997 Asian financial crisis spurred many Koreans to seek opportunities abroad, with Philippines emerging as a favorable option. Okay, so if you can see here in the chart, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Korean migrants in the Philippines are typically classified into 4 categories: permanent residents, general residents, foreign students, and foreign nationals. This classification reflects the diverse purpose and duration of Korean migration to the country, much like an international context. Korean migration to the Philippines gained momentum from the 1990s to the early 2000s, with scholars noting that it is more recent phenomenon. By 2000, around 1,750 174,966 Koreans resided in the country, growing to 303,867 by 2003. This trend continued into the 2010s with about 93,000 residents and between 2015 and 2017. However, by 2019 to 2020, the population dipped around 84,000. And despite this, South Korea remained the largest group of foreign tourists with nearly 2 million visiting annually. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a sharp decline, reducing the numbers to 33,000 in 2001 and the arrival of tourists around 338,877. By 2024, however, the tourism rebounded to 1.2 million, reflecting a strong recovery and ongoing Korean presence in the Philippines. Several studies have explored Korean migration to the Philippines and traces its history from the Spanish colonial period, focusing on the growth of Korean associations. It is also highlight how this migration differs from south to north patterns, driven by economic and lifestyle factors. Other studies examine the everyday lives of Koreans in different provinces. This work mostly focuses on adult migrants, particularly parents moving to support their children's education, which is a common reason for migration, which means that experiences of young migrants or children who migrated to the Philippines remain underexplored or unexplored as well, which is important as these migrants have already reached adulthood in the Philippines and has moved on with their lives either in the Philippines or another country of destination. Next slide. Okay, so we now enter the 1.5 generation. Okay? The concept of 1.5 generation is useful for examining this particular group of migrants. It refers to individuals who were born in their country of origin, in this case, Korea, but migrated before or during their adolescence. Okay? They are positioned between the first generation migrants who move as adults and second generation migrants born in the host country. The 1.5 generation navigates two cultures, retaining their heritage, or Korean heritage, while adapting to their new environment or the local culture in the Philippines. Okay, next slide. The leading pioneer sociologist, Ruben Rombao, defines the 1.5 generation as those who migrated between 6 and 12 years old, enough to retain the literacy in their native language, in this case, the Hangul language, but young enough to complete their education abroad, or in this case, the Philippines. Okay, little is known about migrants who arrived as children during the peak migration years of 2005 and 2010. Many of them completed their education in the Philippines, but their paths into adulthood remains clear. What happens to them after they complete their education? This presentation is a part of a larger growing study on the experiences of belonging among 1.5 generation Koreans in the Philippines. By examining their feelings of belonging, we gain insights into the complexities of Korean migration in the country, including temporary migration, navigating both Filipino and Korean cultures, transition across life stages, and the influence of global Korean culture or Hallyu in the Philippines. Okay, next slide. So these are just the uniqueness of this study. Okay, next slide. Okay. Belonging. Okay. In migration studies, belonging is often described as vague and under-theorized. Still, scholars have identified common ways in structure in their analysis. Yuval Davis introduces a framework with two interconnected dimensions. The first considers belonging as an emotional experience, a sense of being at home, and secure, grounded in personal attachments to a place. The second is the politics of belonging, which refers to the formal policies and regulations such as those involving citizenship, culture, and tradition, and that those who shape which is included or excluded. Okay, building on this, Marco Anton Sik also defines belonging through two dimensions. The first is place belonging. Okay? Place belonging highlights the emotional side while feeling at home in a space that provides comfort, familiarity, security. This dimension is influenced by autobiographical, or their life story, relational, cultural, economic, and legal factors. And the second one aligns with the politics of belonging, focusing on the institutions or mechanisms. This refers to the visa renewals, okay? The IDs that you need to secure, that governs the inclusion and exclusion within social and spatial context. Next slide. Okay, this study, drawing on the Anton 6-2010 first dimension belonging as an emotional attachment to place, I focus on my interlocutors' experience in their everyday lives as they go through different stages of the Philippines. This study, okay, this paper is a part of an ongoing research on Korean 1.5 generations in the Philippines, okay, focusing on their experience across different life stages. 10 participants, okay, mostly aged 22 and 30, were recruited through their personal networks and through snowballing sampling. They migrated with their families from South Korea to the Philippines between 2001 and 2007, when they were only 6 to 12 years old. Most of them were from Seoul and settled in various parts of the Philippines. All completed secondary education and pursued university degrees in Metro Manila. After graduation, some returned to Korea for family or military obligations, while others stayed to work in Korean companies, freelance, or moved between different countries, or returned back to the Philippines. They were interviewed using online, and they were asked, "Tell me your life story," as an interview method. Okay, next slide. Okay. So, what I've discovered on findings of belonging is that place belonging or feelings at home were mostly described in the following terms. First is practice. The practice of Filipino customs alongside Korean culture or Korean heritage. Feelings of being welcome and experiencing friendliness throughout. And lastly, a life story that resonates more with Filipinos and life in the Philippines than amongst Koreans or in South Korea. Okay, next slide. So, we are now looking into practicing Filipino culture. Okay? So, in the code that I presented, Jenny, who arrived in the Philippines at the age 9, lived in the Philippines for 10 to 15 years. She, when I spoke to her in her interview, she was in South Korea, and she talked about her engagement with the Filipino culture. I didn't really have the idea that I was Korean because I gradually learned how to speak Filipino language, adapted to the Filipino culture, and ate Filipino food. Like, you know, putting soy sauce on the rice and eating it with my hands. Yeah, that's it. I thought that it was my culture, and I adopted to that culture really quickly. People started asking to me, "Filipino ba yung mother mo?" More like, "Is your mom is Filipino?" And yeah, that's when I realized I was not Filipino. I didn't really have that much difficulty thinking back, adapting to the Filipino culture. Okay? Her statements okay, not only show familiarity with Filipino culture, okay, but also confidence to practice it, giving her a sense of safety and security among her peers and in the wider community. For most of my interlocutors, cultural knowledge and practice deepened over time and shaped their sense of belonging. They were well acquainted with their neighborhoods, whether in the province or in Metro Manila, knew how to get around by jeepneys or tricycles and daily necessities with ease, ate Filipino food comfortably, and engaged naturally in conversations. They followed local news, listened to Filipino music, and watched Filipino television shows. Their belonging was closely tied to their ability to move through daily life with ease without conscious or effort or hesitation. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Next, practicing culture. Okay. Conversely, my interlocutors express a strong sense of place belonging through their ability to practice their Korean culture. So 1.5 generation not only practices the local culture, but their ethnic cultures as well. Like the first generation, they upheld their parents' tradition, but stood out how freely and consistently they could do without major obstacles. While building strong connections with Filipino society, they maintained their Korean heritage with ease, helped by rising popularity of Hallyu. This welcoming environment allowed them to practice their culture openly, reinforcing their sense of comfort. So the ability to practice one's own ethnic culture generates a sense of belonging. Okay, belonging in this case involved not only embracing local life, but also feeling accepted in practicing different cultural lifestyles. In the slide that I'm presenting to you, it highlights now a different form of belonging. Okay? So this is approaching belonging through feelings of being welcome or experiencing friendliness throughout. The warmth and openness of Filipinos came through clearly in my interlocutor's interview. For Jasper, who lived in the Philippines for 25 years, the welcome he received at primary school helped him adapt just and feel secure. I guess during my during my grade school days, despite my lack of speaking or even writing skills, I had really good teachers and friends who were very open. They were excited to have a Korean or at least an international student in their school in their class. I was told it wasn't very difficult. If I try to think back, everyone, even the students, were very helpful in trying to overcome the language barrier. Across the different life stages, my interlocutor consistently described feelings of welcome by the Filipino local community. Upon arrival, despite limited English skills, they recalled classmates, teachers, and neighbors, and even individuals in the street showing kindness and openness. This sense of acceptance continued throughout their university and into adulthood. Even after they became fluent in language and fully adapted to life in the Philippines, belonging for them was not just about navigating their surroundings, but about feeling genuinely welcome, accepted, and valued. They formed close relationships with Filipinos, both in school and their neighborhoods, describing local community as consistently accommodating, open, and eager to build friendly relations. Okay, next slide. Okay. Next slide. So in the last part of my presentation, okay, belonging as a life story shaped by Filipino experience. Okay. A common theme in my interlocutor's interview is stories of their education, which often drove their family's migration to the Philippines. Their narratives typically follow a clear timeline: arrival, primary and secondary schooling, followed by university or college, with some also mentioning work experience. This contrasts sharply with the stories of adult migrants, who focus more on work, business, retirement, and the fast-paced life in Korea. The life stages of my 1.5 generation participants provided a unique perspective on Korean migration to the Philippines, one that centers on growing up in the country. These stories highlight the goals their parents had for them, on how these goals were often shaped. Okay? Next slide. Okay. So, in the findings of Shaped by Filipino Experience, Jillian moved to the Philippines at age 5, returned to Korea at age 7, and came back to the Philippines at age 10, where he lived for 10 to 15 years. During our interview, which was conducted in Korea, she reflected on the difference between the two countries. Recently, I heard this statement from a friend of mine saying, "Jillian, I feel that you're not Korean, but at the same time, you're not Western enough. But at the same time, I feel that you understand what Koreans think, but at the same time, you don't act like Koreans." That's what I heard from a friend of mine recently, and again gave me another. And it is true. I mean, I understand, I think at level of depth. It's really about the deepness. But when Koreans here in Korea, those who've never been abroad, or those who have never had a certain mindset, I can understand what they're saying because I myself grew up in a Korean household. I can understand what they're saying, but I can never relate to them. I always disagree at the back of my head. Because of that, I just feel I want to go back home, where there are people who can understand me, and I even miss EDSA's traffic. Honestly, I miss said traffic. Okay? Next slide. So Jessica is another peculiar case. Jessica mentioned earlier also shared a similar perspective when describing the competitive culture in Korea, which doesn't align with her current and planned future lifestyle. First of all, it's too competitive. And then when I wasn't sure if I wanted to spend my life like that. Like always working, there is no life after dinner, because it is very important to me to have life after, life and me time. Also seeing the students in Korea and then how the education system breaks into them, I decided it's very good in terms of making students more competitive in the world in terms of like me. Being efficient is being really focused on. like learning advanced things, especially in terms of like math and everything. But then, after experiencing the education system here in the Philippines, but of course, I'm not representing like the whole education system because they went to a private school. I didn't know how it was really focusing on humanities side, like culturing the students to be a person. It could be human as a part of society. And in conclusion, okay, there is still much to learn about the 1.5 generation in the Philippines. Research has largely focused on first-generation migrants or the parents of migrants' children. Yet the 1.5 generation presents distinct experiences that deserve greater attention. They differ not only from their parents, but also from the short-term migrants and peers raised entirely in Korea. Their ability to maintain their heritage while integrating into Filipino life reflects a unique position, okay, that's shaped by growing up in a different cultural settings. Further research is needed to understand how their sense of belonging to both countries develop, especially given that their temporary status in the Philippines and that they can leave anytime and they will never revoke their Korean citizenship. It is also important to explore how they adjust when returning to Korea after they're spending their formative years in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Neville, for that quite informative presentation. Now I'd like to call on our second presenter. We have Hannah Faith Monana from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her presentation is titled Korean Diaspora as Agents of Migration to the Philippines, a study on Korean Community Association in the Philippines.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Hannah Faith Monana, and I'm going to present my, this is an ongoing research that I am working on for my master's thesis. So this is about Korean diaspora as agents of migration to the Philippines, focusing on the Korean community associations. So just a brief background, and I think Sir Manavis also had a run-through of the history of migration, of Korean migration to the Philippines. So since 2006, South Koreans ranked first among the foreign tourist arrivals in the Philippines with more than 1.6 million arrivals. And Korean presence in the Philippines is becoming more evident with the rising popularity of Korean pop culture, cosmetics, food, fashion, etc. And Korean as a foreign language is also becoming popular for students and fans of Korean dramas. And Philippines is also attractive to Koreans as a place for retirement because of first its geographical proximity, low cost of living, and its tropical climate. And because of the increasing number of Korean migrants in the Philippines, the Koreans in the country started to form a Korean community to maintain their connection to their culture and to show their pride as Koreans. Next, please. So here are some of the first and largest Korean community associations established in the Philippines. So the first one is the United Korean Community Associations, which was established in 1969. And there's also Korean Women's Association, formed in 1975 by Korean women who married Filipinos. And another one is Korean Chamber of Commerce, which was created in 1994 to cater to the growing popularity of Korean businesses in the Philippines. Of course, these are just a few of the main Korean associations. And of course, there are a lot more associations established in the Philippines, especially that the first one, the UKCA, has several regional chapters throughout the country, in which one is the focus of my research. Next, please. So my study focuses on Iloilo Korean Community Association, which is a regional chapter of the UKCA that was mentioned earlier. So I chose Iloilo as an area to study since it was less explored compared to other areas in the Philippines where there are more established Korean communities such as Metro Manila, Cebu, Baguio, Pampanga, and Davao. So the Korean Community Association in Iloilo was officially registered as a non-stop non-profit organization under the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2022, but it was established and has been active in Iloilo since 2006. So it has two main goals. First is to share information about Iloilo with Koreans and help them with their needs to settle in the area. and to promote Korean culture in Iloilo and to form friendship with the Ilonggos. Next, please. So the most visible landmark of the presence of Korean community in Iloilo is the creation of Iloilo Koreatown, located in a festive mall, Iloilo City. So it is one of the main initiatives of the association to introduce the Korean culture to the residents of Iloilo. And IKUCA also donated $5,000 to the Microworld Corporation, which is the developer of the mall and the business district area, to develop and maintain the Koreatown. So this K-Town was officially inaugurated in 2023. So in this study, I'm going to use the social capital theory to see and analyze the activities of the Korean associations. So according to Purdue, he defines social capital as the aggregate of the actual or potential resources which are linked to the possession of a durable network. And it is characterized by elements such as participation of people towards a common goal, creation of networks, trust among the people of the community, and bond between people results a feeling of sense of belonging. And Putnam also defines social capital as social networks that let individuals collaborate more effectively to reach a common goal. Next. So I argue that the Korean Association in Iloilo forms social capital through these three roles: as a bonding institution, as a mediator, and a negotiator. Next. So as a bonding institution, so Korean Community Association serves as the focal point and the entity that binds the Koreans in Iloilo. Through its activities for the Korean community, the association is able to become the common ground of Koreans to foster shared values, beliefs, goals, and experiences that cultivate trust and cooperation. Next, please. So, like for example, the association organizes activities for the Koreans living in Iloilo to meet each other and celebrate major Korean holidays such as Chuseok and Seollal. So for this, they had this is during Seollal, they had Tteokguk event, rice cake soup. So, and then next, please. And then this one is during Chuseok, they had a sports fest. So this is the time where Koreans meet each other and celebrate the holiday and the Korean culture. And also according to the study of Cabañas, being in a foreign land, Koreans also experience isolation in individual and community level. So one reason is that Koreans find it difficult to communicate with Filipinos because of language difference and limited English. And differences in culture is also one factor. Koreans do not fully accept Filipino norms and still choose to practice etiquettes related to Confucianism and the hierarchical society. So through this active participation in the events and activities organized by the association, members of the Korean community can maintain a sense of connection to their homeland. Engaging with fellow Koreans enables them to practice cultural traditions, uphold social norms, and share information to overcome challenge of living in a foreign land. Next, please. So next is as a mediator. So Korean Association also functions as a mediator between the Korean community and the governmental institutions, including the Korean government represented by its embassy and the Philippines government, thereby facilitating communication, cooperation, and access to institutional support. Next. So, like for this example, one of the recent initiatives of the association is partnership with the Bureau of Immigration to help them resolve easy resolution with their visa concerns. And IKUCA also offers visa assistance such as a retirement visa, working visa, student visa, and shares relevant information to the new migrants to facilitate their settlement in Iloilo. And in addition to visa assistance, the association also offers assistance in doing paperwork in Iloilo, such as getting a driver's license, opening a bank accounts, finding a house and information and rent system, and house contracts, and even enrolling in schools, since also one of the reasons why Koreans come to the Philippines is to get cheaper but a quality education. So in Iloilo, they enroll in schools such as Ateneo de Iloilo, Washong, and Iloilo Scholastic Academy. And also in instances where there is a need of coordination with the Philippine government and the Korean embassy, such as if there's a medical emergency where a Korean needs to go back to Korea, so the association also coordinates with the authority to facilitate its immediate repatriation. Next, please. And lastly, as a negotiator, so the Korean Association also functions as a key intermediary between the diaspora community and host society institutions. So it engages in strategic partnerships with local governments and key institutions and acts as a negotiator to advance the interests of the Korean community. So, next. So one of the initiatives of the Korean Association is partnership with the Medical City. So there's a Korean care hub that was launched to specifically cater Koreans. So this initiative arose from the difficulty of the Korean community during the pandemic, where access to healthcare is difficult, especially to foreigners. And this Korean desk helped the Koreans who need medical assistance and easier and faster service. So for example, directional signages and essential medical forms are translated in Korean to ensure data accuracy and easier filling out of forms. And the personnel assigned in the Korean desk had undergone basic training in Korean language, which gives them proficiency in assisting Korean patients. And also during the pandemic, the association donated 100,000 pesos to the Iloilo City government to help fight the pandemic. And in turn, they negotiated with the local government to include Koreans in the vaccination, since the vaccines from the government were initially intended for Filipinos. However, it is also important to acknowledge that not all negotiation efforts of the association were successful. So one example is their persistent request to establish direct flights between Iloilo and South Korea. So the continued absence of direct flight is because they say that Iloilo still has no tourist spots that reach the international standards, unlike the one of Cebu, Bohol, and of course Boracay. And another reason that attracts Koreans to come to the Philippines is to play golf. And currently, Iloilo only has one golf course. And so currently, Koreans who come to Iloilo enter through the Calibo Airport, Calibaclan, where Boracay is nearby. Next, please. And aside from networking activities, they also conduct cultural events and activities such as the Iloilo Korea Friendship Festival that is held annually. So this festival is characterized by performances and Korean artists and Filipinos covering Korean songs and dances. Next, please. And they also partnered with the local K-pop fan clubs to set up booths that sells merchandises of the K-pop groups and actors, which also attracted a lot of fans. And most of the attendees were the fans of Korean popular culture. So they also utilized the popularity of Hallyu to attract audience. Next, please. And the association also used to conduct free Korean classes for Filipinos, but it now stopped when King Sejong Institute was formally established at West Visayas State University. And the association also instead referred interested locals to learn Korean language to King Sejong Institute. And they also have resources such as Korean books and handbooks, which they allow students to borrow for free. Next, please. And lastly, they strengthen friendship with the local government and people of Iloilo. So the association conducts activities such as donation drive and outreach activities to the community. So what is notable about these outreach activities is that the money used for these activities were gathered from the donations of the Koreans living in Iloilo. And the Korean government, through the Korean Embassy and the Korean Overseas Foundation, also gives financial support, but cannot fully fund the activities of the association. So they mostly rely on the donations of the Koreans. So these outreach activities give Koreans a good image and a message that they are a friend and wants to live in harmony with the Ilonggos. Lastly, so to conclude, so I have 4 points. So the Korean community in Iloilo centered in Korean association accumulates social capital by forming networks through shared experiences, cultural values, and common goals, living in a foreign land. And through its roles as a bonding institution, mediator, and negotiator, the association contributes to the formation of social capital, reinforcing the community's capacity for collective action. And they conduct cultural and philanthropic activities and utilize the popularity of Hallyu to develop friendship and form good image in the community. And lastly, the Korean diaspora has effectively utilized its positive image to negotiate with local authorities and key institutions to achieve their goals and facilitate their settlement in Iloilo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Now we move to our last presenter. So our last presenter is Rochelle Leonor from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. And her presentation is titled When Age is Just a Number, the Case of Middle-Aged Filipina K-pop Concert Goers. Rochelle.
Annyeonghaseyo, good morning, magandang umaga. I'll be presenting my ongoing research When Age is Just a Number, the Case of Middle-Aged Filipina K-pop Concert Goers. So this is the outline of my presentation. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Rochelle. I'm a third-year MA Asian Studies student specializing in Northeast Asia, Korea from the University of the Philippines. My work experience is in communications and digital marketing. My research interests are the Korean War and the role of North Korea and the role of media on various Korean issues. And because this conference is sponsored by the Korea Foundation, I have to mention that I am a recipient of the KF Scholarship for Graduate Studies for 2 years now. Next, please. And this segues to the ever-growing influence of Korean popular music in the Philippines. So, if you're an Ajuma like me, you would have probably encountered this song. So, contrary to popular belief, Nobody by the Wonder Girls was not the first Korean pop song to become viral or popular here in the Philippines. It was this song, Jolapada, or Answer the Phone by Shin Mina, who went viral in 2002. And the first major K-pop concert was Super Junior Super Show 2, which is my bias as well. So it was held in the Philippines in 2010 at the Araneta Coliseum. So this was followed by other Korean pop hits like Nobody, Gangnam Style, and the very recent Earworm, Apatsu. So when we think of K-pop and K-pop concerts, the first image that comes to mind is an image of a young woman, probably in her 20s or maybe early 20s, all decked up, all bedazzled. Next, please. And when we think of a middle-aged woman, you would normally picture someone who rarely attends concert, or if she does, she's looking extremely bored like this. But the middle-aged Filipina of today is far from that image. Maybe I don't look like it, but she's hip, she's cool, she's confident, and most importantly, she has disposable income. And these women love to express themselves in various ways. And this leads me to ask the following question. How does attending K-pop concerts shape the identity and social connections of middle-aged Filipina fans? What are the financial, emotional, and cultural investments of women like me who are K-pop concert goers? And how do these shape their fandom experience? And how do these K-pop concert attendance influence intergenerational relationships, particularly between middle-aged Filipina fans and their mothers and their children? So I interviewed 11 middle-aged women and posed several questions on their lived experience in watching live K-pop concerts. Then I analyzed their responses to identify common themes and other patterns. Of course, I made sure the respondents and their answers remain anonymous and that they consent to using the information from the study. So what is their profile? So their average age is 41, with majority of them being married. Some have kids, some have don't, and they have watched at least one live K-pop concert. In this study, I didn't include attending fan meets or online concerts, just live K-pop concerts. Okay, next please. So I found that the average number of watched concerts is at least 2, but that's as of June 2020 when I conducted an interview. And at the time of that interview, one respondent said she had already purchased tickets for 6 concerts for 2023. And the favorite artists are diverse. Some are K-pop groups and some solo artists like Kangdaniel. And what's surprising or ridiculous is that more than half of the respondents flew to other countries to watch live K-pop concerts. So what motivates them to watch these K-pop concerts? Some said they needed to accompany their children who are minors. There are after all concerts that prohibit unaccompanied minors, so this is really good for marketing and overall profitability for concert producers and even the management agencies of artists. A concert producer can target young audiences, but at the same time require a parent to buy another ticket. It's like a buy 2 tickets deal. And some respondents have said attending concerts provide them an opportunity to spend time and bond with friends who are also fans, and it also reflects a desire to see their favorites in person. Somebody also said she won tickets, and this started her desire to watch more concerts in person. So what's the impact on interest? So attending live concerts deepened their interest in K-pop because of how impressive the production value is and the fan service. So if you have watched a K-pop concert live, you know what I'm saying. So I myself have attended quite a few, and I'm impressed with how much fan service is given. Some concerts even allow photo opportunities with the artist, which to me is really getting your money's worth. In terms of financial commitment, yeah, and there's a financial commitment. The average amount the respondents have spent for these concerts is 112,000 pesos. So this includes airfare, accommodations, fan merch, new clothes, among others. Some also create and give away their own personal creations like marks, banners, and whatnot. One respondent said she has spent as high as 400,000 for attending 2 concert tickets, 2 concerts. There's even a running joke among concert goers na magbibenta na lang sila ng kidney nila. They will sell one of their kidneys. Tama po yun, sabi niya, to be able to finance the activity, which highlights the dedication of fans and the economic impact of K-pop. More importantly, attending these live K-pop concerts serve as avenues to connect. For mom respondents, attending concerts with their children made them feel cool, more relatable, and generally strengthen their mother and daughter bonds. For others, it is an opportunity to bond with friends and to meet fellow fans who share the same interests. So in conclusion, attending live K-pop concerts is a multifaceted experience that blends financial investment, emotional fulfillment, and social connections. Fans often go to great lengths to participate, finding joy and meaning through shared passions and memorable interaction. So this concludes my presentation on some conferences, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rochelle, for that fascinating presentation. In fact, age is just a number. So, I did research in Japan as well, and one of the earlier Hallyu fans are what we call obasan, or middle-aged women. The Young-sama phenomenon. If you remember Winter Sonata? Yes. Yeah, it started in Japan, so it was big here. So, I'd like to open the floor now for questions or any comments from our audience. We have, I think, 20 minutes. Oh, I'd like to invite the speakers to the front, please. Questions? We have 2 over here.
Hello, good morning. First, I'd like to say that I really enjoyed all the presentation. Actually, this is not more of a question, but I want to hear the thoughts of the first speaker. I'm coming from this question comes from personal background because I'm currently working at Westfields International School, where majority of our students are Koreans. And every time that I ask them, because the first speaker did mention very clear how the Koreans integrated themselves very well in Philippine culture. In fact, one of the comments that I often receive among my students, because they are so into Korean Filipino culture, when they go back to Korea, sometimes they feel less Koreans. So sometimes they feel that they are being discriminated because they are so Filipino now instead of so Koreans. So my question, what are your thoughts on that kind of system that, the Korean migrants, when they are here in the Philippines, they integrated themselves so well in Philippine culture. So when they come back to Korea, sometimes they feel like they are less Koreans.
I'm assuming that's
true.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Well, among the 1.5 generation, or the interlocutors that I met, they differentiate themselves among Koreans who also live in the Philippines. Because there are Koreans, they don't want to be associated with Koreans who just stay here for a year or two just to learn English and then go back there. So there is also, I only found out, I always thought they were all the same, but they differentiate themselves that these people just learn how to speak English a bit, but you ask them in greater detail they can. Okay? So these individuals are also different groups. Okay? The 1.5 that I know, based on my experience, when they return to Korea, they don't have any problems integrating, adapting, because they always say that they have lived in a Korean household. They're never allowed to speak English because their parents, the family, the family is not allowed, they cannot speak because they're first generation. Okay? So that's one thing. Okay? However, in their mind, they know they're different. Okay? I'll give you an example of them. When they talk to other Koreans, they talk to them like Filipino, looking at their eyes intently. And so other Koreans will be uncomfortable, and they ask sometimes. But for them, they know that there is different. And sometimes it slips when they interact with other Koreans. For example, they forget the seniority amongst Koreans. Okay? The way, survey, and all of those things. They forget, and then they realize, oh, I'm in Korea, or something like that. When I visited some of them in Korea, we were drinking coffee in Starbucks. I stood up, I was planning to fix the table. She just stood up and left, and then came back and forgot, oh, I'm in Korea. And we have to clean up the table. We have to clean up the table together. And I said, those some of the things slip out. But I cannot say anything about those Koreans who were there because they will really notice something. Might be the attitude, might be, for example, oh, let's work. No, I'm going to go home already. Because here, work day's done, it's finished. They don't go to any more enrichment classes or something like that. So they never grew up that kind of lifestyle. So sometimes it slips, but they still try to make themselves part of it. Okay? And it was very, very apparent when some of those people who I interviewed went to Korea because it was abrupt because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was very much noticeable for them.
Thank you.
We have another question.
Hi, good morning. I'm Manny Manuel from the Veronta School of Business here in UP Diliman. I'll direct questions to all three. The third question for Rochelle is possibly on behalf of my colleague, Dr. Eric Capistrano, who will be presenting later on a related subject matter. For Neville, my question is, because I guess this is based on experience, I had a Korean classmates when I was going to high school. They stayed here in the Philippines for quite some time. Did you encounter any instances where, because I think a number of the respondents that you talked about, eventually went back to Korea. Have you had any interactions with those who really just wanted to stay here? So, because there's a difference in terms of the whole migration concept, wherein we go to another place and then basically just stay and not actually go back to our home country. So that's for Neville. For Hannah, because it's Iloilo, there's a difference, I guess, from a Filipino cultural perspective as to what the Ilonggo experience is. Possibly, would you look into, or have you encountered any differences in terms of experiences in other communities, like you mentioned, Metro Manila, Cebu, which may be different from Iloilo. And then for Rochelle, Dr. Eric is not here because he's in a meeting, but he really wanted to, because he wanted to ask it. He'll probably, ask you and, find you later on if ever. I guess the question would be, and I guess also from my perspective, just two. One is, did you consider the other side? Meaning, because K-pop is not just about women or middle-aged women, but it's also about the guys and middle-aged guys. And then secondly, is this kind of phenomenon, because I'm actually more leaning towards this, is this something also similar with K-drama? Is this kind of, mindset, thinking also evident in K-drama fans? Because again, the whole gamut of the fandom there. Okay.
Short answer. Most of the I interviewed are actually back in the Philippines. Okay? During the pandemic, they went there, finished their military service because they're 25 to 27 years old. Some of them, their businesses were closed during the pandemic and then went there, and they are back in the Philippines. Some of them don't, either go to Korea, then come back to the Philippines, plan their next move, go to New Zealand, go to China. So the Philippines is just like a stepping stone for them to regroup and to plan. And that's where the concept of belonging comes from, where you are comfortable, where you are feel at home. And it is a very, personally for me, I didn't know anything about it because I'm not a sociologist. I don't know the theories. Bordeaux is something new to me. I don't even know how to pronounce his name correctly that time. Social capital, I don't know what that is. So it was a very difficult entry point for me. Okay, but what I've noticed is that they keep on saying that they're in the Philippines. They're in the Philippines. Okay? And it is a very interesting question to ask. Why do you feel you belong to the Philippines? Because you're not supposed to feel that way. Why? Because you're not a Filipino citizen. Okay? Number two, Koreans are having a much difficult time securing visas. They can only have tourist visa. You have to renew it every 4, 5, 6 months. You have to have an ACR card, okay, that you need to renew. Before Koreans were getting retirement visas, the age of retirement was 35. When the POGO issues came out, they increased it to 55. So it became hostile for everyone. So it's Koreans here, and the migration policy in the Philippines is to make everyone welcome, but at the same time make everyone feel temporary. You need to constantly renew every time. But we will accept you no matter what. Just stay, accept you, and you're here. But those mechanisms make you feel temporary. So what happens to students now, or those who grew up here? What happens to them? And that became much more evident during the COVID-19. None of them can get vaccines. because they're not allowed, because they're not Filipino citizens. But despite all of that, belonging was still felt. Because of their life story, it's because of something else. So that is where this trajectory comes from. Even though they left the Philippines, they come back. Still don't know what happens to them, and that's why it's a very particularly important topic, because the parents may have left, but they always kept on returning. Their friends are here, their life are here, and I recently met 2 of the interlocutors last week, and they settled once again, they got their apartments and everything. So there's still much to be learned about them. It's very difficult to know how many total in them Koreans in the Philippines, because all of them have tourist visa. So we don't really know how many are really living in the Philippines, because they're only issued tourist visa and they constantly renew it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Regarding your question, if there's a differences between other Korean communities, actually haven't really explored other regional associations such as Davao, Baguio, Pampanga, etc. But I had a bit of research on the main one, the UKCA, the first and the largest one in the Metro Manila. Since being they are the largest and the first established, so they are more systematic in their organization, such as for in Iloilo, they consider anyone a member. So there's no like a system of being a member. So they consider anyone who is in Iloilo and a Korean is a member. In UKCA, they have this like a membership that you have to pay a fee. Though I haven't really dig deeper on that, but I just know that they have you have to pay a fee to be a member, and they have, of course, they have more connections. Even though they are based in Metro Manila, they are kind of already encompassing the whole Philippines, such as they have more established connections, such as Philippine Retirement Authority. I just found out, also to my surprise, that when you go for have your retirement visa in the Philippines, you have to pay a fee, like an investment fee or like a fee to the Philippine government. And of course, you have to pay it through the Philippine banks, such as Land Banks, BPI, and then to my surprise, there's also KEB Hana Bank. So maybe that's also one of their partnership. And for the case of Iloilo, it is more localized in Iloilo City.
Thank you.
To answer your question, I haven't fully explored the other side, but from my observations, the husbands, or at least the husbands, they are willing co-financiers of their wives or their children going to K-pop concerts. They allow their children or their wives to indulge in their K-pop fantasies. But I wouldn't be surprised if there would be a trend on this na mas maraming lalaki rin ang nanonood ng K-pop concerts. Because I've also seen this in other countries, like during the Eras tour of Taylor Swift, you would see reels or videos of dads tagging along with their daughters to watch the concerts. So certainly want to pursue a study here in the Philippines. I wouldn't gladly help out with this.
Probably Dr. Kapis.
Okay.
Especially in terms of this recent watching of the Taylor concert.
And then just a second comment, sir. I think there are more middle-aged men who are watching K-dramas than concert goers. Kasi they indulge, they join the wives, their partners in watching. And I also know several middle-aged men, or even retirees, who spend their time just watching K-dramas. Doon na po sila nabubuhay. So I think there are more male watchers, male K-drama watchers. Okay. Okay. Question here.
Thank you very much for your great presentation. Especially, I'd like to ask some question to sorry. Mr. Nawis. Actually, before I also interviewed several of 1.5 generation Koreans who grew up in the Philippines. So yeah, your presentation was very interesting for me. On the other hand, I think how much like exposure by Filipino culture is really depends on your social background and what your parents doing and what kind of school you are going. So if you don't mind, could you share what kind of social background did they have, the people you interview? And the second one is that what I heard before is that the people who grew up in Metro Manila, they have a very positive memories and experience because there are so many foreigners in the Philippines. But on the other hand, people who grew up not in Metro Manila or Cebu or other more countryside, actually they had big struggles to adapt in the Philippines, or some people had like bullies in the school as well. So do you have any plans to interview those people, not only in Metro Manila but also other areas as well? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. First of all, social background and social mobility is very important. I've noticed this in some of my participants or my interlocutors. Some of them grew up in the province, especially those who came from missionary families. Okay? They did not study in private schools. They studied in local schools. So they had to learn the Tagalog language immediately. And they always say that they felt welcome. They felt the welcoming responses, they were okay, they were happy, and they were teased, but not teased because they were Koreans. Okay? They were teased because of something else. Okay? Because they might not have a car. Well, it's a public school, so not everyone has a car. Okay? But they are teased like normal children. So they, I don't know about now, but based on my participants, they just brushed it off as not racism or anything like that. It's just a normal thing growing up. Some of them, half of those people that I interviewed grew up in the province, and not all of them are wealthy. Okay? But they were more wealthy than most Filipinos. Okay? So I would like to stress that because of the mobility issues. Okay? They were not as well off in Korea. When they arrived here, their finances are more greater. Okay? What happened to them? They were comfortable. They did not have any issues. Okay? They were uncomfortable in the start around 2005 to 2010 because not a lot of Filipinos were familiar with Korean culture. But when 2011 arrived, okay, they always tell me that their parents will pack them bibimbap. Okay? And then all of a sudden, Filipinos, they didn't like it. And then when they saw it and they heard about it, everyone was getting their meals. Okay, so there was something like that. Okay, in sociological research, okay, there will always be a curveball. So the curveball here is that when they went to Manila, those Koreans who studied in the province, and when they went to Manila and entered top universities like University of the Philippines, Ateneo, UST, and LaSalle, they had difficulty adjusting. Okay? They felt like in Filipino, they call it provinciana. Okay? The provinciana attitude. In Korean, I think that there's a derogatory term for that. I learned from them, chono. Okay? Something like that, bumpkins. So they felt that they were provincial because they grew up in the province as a Filipino. But so when they arrived in these top universities, they started to regress in their Filipino identity and push more their Korean identity because college students would prefer more. Do you know this? Did you translate for this? Did you know this? Do Koreans dress up like this? So it was a different scenario for them. So even though the social status was not an issue for them, but more of their Filipino status in itself. So when they're growing up in public schools, they had no problem because not all of the schools in the provinces have private schools.
or international schools. So they really grew up in the public schools. So I was very fortunate to interview those individuals who are not that privileged, okay, or who their families were still working here because they need to make a living. Okay, that's it. And I am also a K-pop fan. Okay?
Do we have any other questions? Okay.
I have a question to Hannah, because I think when we talk about Korean community associations overseas, but we can focus on the Philippine associations, there are so many dynamics. And then you just mentioned you browsed and you researched UKCA of NCR, and then your focus is now Iloilo. But I think when you see this particular Iloilo Community Association, there should be some struggles they go through to run their organization. What you mentioned is the airport, right? Because those Iloilo Korean citizens want more Korean tourists from Korea because they will benefit the business run by Korean citizens. But at the same time, they have to deal with the local government because they will favor the activities of Iloilo Korean Association. So it's like they're stuck in between because they need to be favored by the Korean embassy, which is in the capital city, and they have to be favored by Iloilo local government. So it's like two ways that they have to prove their identity and then the impact they can give to Iloilo society. So I think the study is very important, but I think it will make more values if you go beyond descriptive studies, and then you can interpret what are the weakness and the challenges they also go through. It's not just like what they do and that's it. You have to see what they do, what they don't, and what they can't. So what are the problems and reasons?
I think also one challenge that they mentioned to me is the lack of funding. Though there are supports from Korean government through the embassy, but they cannot really fully get full financial support. For example, if they apply for financial support in other activities, they can only get 50%. So mostly really they rely on the donations from the Koreans. So I think that's when I also ask what's their challenges, it's really the recurring thing that the director also keep on mentioning with the financial situations. And thank you, Dr. Ben. I think it's also a good thing to also really look into more on that, the challenges that they face.
Any other questions?
This is for Rochelle. As a fellow middle-aged Filipina K-pop concert goer, I'd like to ask, since you conducted in the personal interviews, were there any point when your participants had certain reflections on what they're doing or how much they're spending? Because you mentioned they spend hundreds of thousands. Was there any point in the interviews or any of the interviews when they tend to reflect on their actions or namumulek na ako ng papel, things like those? Or what value do they add into like this conversation of attending K-pop concerts?
The only takeaway I got from them is that they're very, very happy with their expenses. There is no hint or tinge of resentment or regret or sadness, even with the amount they have spent on this concert. If anything, they are even willing to spend more. Especially now that BTS will be reunited soon. So they're actually saving since the guys went to the military. They have been saving money to make sure that they attend the reunion concert. So that's the only good thing I know.
Curious po kasi since magastos, it's very expensive. Like for me, for example, I just go there for a weekend to watch a concert very recently, and I know the expenses. But question is to your participants, did you find any difficulties, or did they find any difficulties po? Like, given the fact that they don't have any problems with financial problems, but did they face any difficulties? Like, for example, to book a ticket, like for example, yung concert tickets. Because sometimes po kasi, it's pre-sale, membership, ganun po. Yeah, because it's different po because whenever there's a concert, there's a pre-sale for membership, and membership has a cost po. So, ayun po yung question ko.
Okay, the difficulties I observe are, well, yes, the booking tickets. But maybe in my community or in my sphere, there is such a thing as pasabay.
Pasabay.
Yes. So they are all in agreement that if one is able to get into the system, the ticketing system, they will buy for the others.
But the question for that po is, yung pasabay po kasi ng ticketing sa concert is only parang minsan certain numbers lang. So,
yes.
So, like 2 to 3 lang.
So they're all in the system.
Wow.
So it's very common in my sphere to see friends say, "Oh, I have extra tickets. Who wants to buy?" So even if you don't actually say to your friends now, "Oh, you buy for me," they will buy the allocation, and then they're very confident that they are able to unload the paper. So another probably difficulty they encountered in watching these concerts is maybe the common complaint is they don't want to buy the standing VIP. Only because they're old like me and they don't want to stand up for so many hours. So their only requirement is they will buy the seated VIP tickets. That's it. They will not stand. That's the only complaint they have.
Good question.
Another follow-up. This is such a good conversation. Hello po, I am Josel Arayes from Massachusetts State University in Iloilo. So, with that po, it's middle age. Given the ticketing process is so complicated, it's online, it's all these codes. So, just an interesting observation. Middle age po kasi, like us, well, we are usually tagged as digital migrants. So with so much, and yung one sa atin is the knowledge that we have on the internet is very limited. Makapag-Word, makapag-Excel, okay na, parang ganun. But it's, given that we are digital migrants and with such a complicated ticketing process, diba, talo pa po ba natin yung digital natives? Yung parang ganun. So it's just more of a comment probably na, diba, so that transcends what the, yung parang research natin na hindi tayo masyadong
we're not that in-depth when it comes to technology things. Pero middle-aged women are securing tickets that are so difficult to secure online. As digital migrants, not as digital natives. So so yes, ma'am.
You know, see, we have a backup. Because we're digital migrants, we know how to navigate our way online, but we also have a backup, meaning we can queue in line if needed. So even among my friends, even if they will book tickets online, if there is an opportunity to go to the ticket booth and line up for hours, they will do it.
Hello, I'm Susan. I'm also an Anjuma stan, like everyone here. So, yun nga, napaka-interesting mga discussion. But I just want to, before I question, no comments lang. Actually, yung ticketing, maybe nabanggit ni Ma'am Rochelle is that kaya a lot of us may pumupunta sa ibang bansa to watch. In fact, parang ginagawang Quiapo. Even like, hindi na mag-book ng hotel, just like go there, watch, and then come home na. It's because ang hirap dito, aside from the very complicated ticketing system, ang kalaban pa natin is the very slow internet connection. Diba? So, pero the thing is, since ako ay isang Anjuma, I have a lot of mga pamangkins na parang nagbibigay na tips, or even help me parang book. Pero yung isa pang na-bring up, I'm not sure if everyone or anyone is parang aware, yung mga ticketing bots. You know, parang weird lang. That's where parang there's this line between parang ethical buying for me. Because like, you can ask the help of like, I'm not sure if that's the right term, like hackers who use ticketing bots. So they can parang have or fall in line virtually, parang sila yung nakakakuha ng mas maraming options to buy tickets, and then you will pay them. Of course, it's much expensive, but you're guaranteed to secure tickets. Parang, kaya lang I draw the line there. Parang weird lang, parang hindi patos, and parang unfair naman to other fans if I use that. So last concert of J-Hope, I sing labas. But anyway, back to my question. Specifically for Ma'am Leonor, did you touch in your ongoing study the issue of or concern of our middle-aged animals regarding parasocial relationships and what are their awala?
Not there, but thank you for bringing that up. Maybe I can explore it another time.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any last call for questions? Last call for questions, I mean. Okay, as a prerogative of the moderator, I have a question for Neville. Just a quick question. Because you talked about belonging, and then of the 1.5 generation, so did you take into consideration the period of migration? Because there are some Koreans who entered the Philippines during the 1980s. And then also you have the more recent 1.5 generation, that's one. And another question, because you also mentioned something about their experiences in Korea. So I was thinking, because these are gyopos, right, the overseas Koreans. And if we look at how Korean society looks at overseas Koreans, right, they have a different perception of overseas Koreans in the US, and of course in Southeast Asia, etc. So does that image of the gyopo place in the Philippines contribute to this sense of belongingness that is formed within these 1.5 generation Koreans that you interviewed? So that's my question.
Okay, first, my study is very much limited only
2000 during the influx of Koreans in the Philippines up to the 2020. However, before I did this research, I was able to talk to a lot of Koreans who migrated in the Philippines in the 1970s and the 1980s. But there's some complexities with regards to their viability as to talk to them, because some of them migrated to the US, got US citizenship, and moved back to the Philippines. So how do you classify these individuals? So I talked to a lot of people who had different nationalities already, but they are Koreans ethnically, okay, but they're living in the Philippines, but they are US citizens. So that's another complication. But due to the nature of my research, that happened only during the COVID-19, which is 2020 to the present. My data gathering process was limited only to online interviews. Okay? So that, I don't know, it was fortuitous or act of God, or I don't know, but it limited my participants to only those tech-savvy individuals, or those individuals who are comfortable talking to me over Zoom, Teams, KakaoTalk, or even Viber itself. So that's the reason I only got 1.5 generation. So they are the ones who are familiar with this technology, because those older generations, who I'm also friends, were uncomfortable doing it online, using this online platform, because probably of technological gap, or it wasn't that, it's something new to them. But if that happens right now, it's much comfortable. Your last question, yes, based on my knowledge of Korean history, Korean migration is a very difficult topic, okay? Especially when do you classify Korean migrants? Okay? Is it before North and South Korea happened? Is it before, during the migration? How about those Koreans that was captured by the Japanese and brought back to Japan? Okay? How about those Russians, Koreans? How about those Chinese in their borders? Okay, so how do you classify it? That's why in the Overseas Korean Affairs, which they established a couple of last year, I think, Overseas Korean Affairs, who manages everything, they have a lot of definitions of migrants, from Dongpo, Gyopo, from the Russian Koreans, from Chinese Koreans, from American Koreans, and it's different from, it's nothing to fit all of these Koreans. Even in the Philippines, we can say they are migrants, but we can say they are circular migrants, because they have an intention to return, because they cannot stay here in the Philippines forever. Okay, so the migration definition for them is different. But based on my interlocutors, or my participants, when they arrived in Korea, they had no difficulties being integrated or accepted by their community. I think the reason for that is that they migrated when they already learned the Korean language, they experienced some socialization in Korea, so they're familiar with it. And then they grew up in a household with first generation, their parents, who doesn't know any, or limited in English, so they still grew up in a Korean household itself. They were asked to do all of these things. The challenge right now for them is how do you manage living across two cultures, a Korean culture and a Filipino culture? And sometimes, when you change location, it slips. They don't know if what they're talking, or if this is acceptable or not, so it takes a long process for them to figure it out. That's why the 1.5 generation is such a fascinating story to talk about, especially they lived in the Philippines for 20 to 25 years.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much to our presenters. Kindly give them a